Welcome to this week's episode of Square State. I'm your host, Michelle Jackson. Remember, this is not a podcast. Today's guest is going to school us on all ways to get beautiful vintage and thrift clothing. And she also shares why she doesn't particularly like thrifting in Denver and where she goes to instead. We also talk about how Denver is becoming a foodie city, and this is saying something because of where she is from. I hope you get a lot out of this episode. Please email me at coloradolovehub@gmail.com. That's coloradoluvhub@gmail.com. If you have any tips, suggestions, or people that you think I should talk to or topics I should cover. Would you like to move to Colorado? Do you work in a STEM-related industry? Then you should sign up with Hired.com, the go-to resource that I recommend for job seekers in STEM-related fields. Click the link in the show notes so that you can set up your profile today. I'm a proud affiliate, and I've had the opportunity to meet the Denver-based team. They really would like to get you working today. Click the link in the show notes. Get started on your profile. Don't move here without a job. I'm your host, Michelle Jackson, and today we are having some technical difficulties because the electric in my home is gone. So please note that on occasion we might break up a little bit, but if that happens, I'll make sure to go back and clean it up as best I can. I'm really excited to do today's episode because we're talking clothing, we're talking thrifting, we're talking vintage, and like all the stuff that I kind of love. There's a reason why I had a personal finance blog called the Shop My Closet Project, because I love fashion. And today's guest is going to kind of school us on all the things that we need to know about finding amazing vintage clothes, thrifting, and then we'll talk about Colorado and random stuff because I'm going to share this episode on 2 different podcasts. So, Carlin, could you introduce yourself?
So I'm Carlin. I am an avid thrifter and vintage collector. That would be my dream job. However, my normal life is actually as a corporate lawyer.
Are you serious?
Yes.
That is the coolest. I never would have thought that. That's the best thing ever.
Yeah, it surprises some people, but it makes sense how I got into thrifting, I promise.
Actually, I can't wait to dive into that. And actually, before we get more into the interview, could you talk about your business and the name of your business so that people can know where to find you?
Sure. So I sell vintage clothes and knickknack on Etsy. My shop name is Thrifting Coups, and there's a story behind that name as well, which I'm sure you'd love to hear, which is just that, when you find something amazing in a thrift store, like a really high-end designer or this really incredible piece, and you only pay like $2 for it, it's kind of like you pulled one over on the thrift store on the world, and that's where I got the name Thrifting Coup.
Let's dive into you're a corporate lawyer and you thrift by night. Like, please, walk us through how this happened.
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I've been thrifting for a really long time. I don't really remember exactly how I got into it, but I know that, after college and going back to school, I was very poor, but I worked at a fancy law firm or a big company, and so I needed the wardrobe to go with it. And so thrift stores just allowed me to kind of pad my wardrobe with nicer things that I might not otherwise be able to afford.
Did you ever feel weird about wearing thrift and working as a lawyer? Like, did anyone ever sit there and say, well, where'd you get that? And you're like, well, I got it from, or were you like, hey, I got this from this place and this is pretty freaking awesome and this is how you do it? Was there ever a stigma attached to some of your clothing?
Yeah, some people might be weird about it, but no, I think if you talk to anyone who's into thrifting and somebody gives them a compliment, the first thing they want to do is say, oh, I got this at Goodwill and I only paid, 99 cents for it. So it's like a source of pride. And so I will gladly tell complete strangers that I got something at a thrift store. I think, as I was working, I might wear a nice suit or something, but then some crazy vintage silk blouse underneath or something like that. And I got a lot of compliments, and I got a lot of people who thought, hey, like, how do you do this? Can you help me do this? And can you find stuff for me? And so that's kind of also how I got into selling.
When did you get into selling and online? And if you could share your Etsy link too, that would be great.
So the link is Thrifting Coups, which is thriftingcoups.etsy.com. I think that's the direct link. I started selling probably about a decade ago. I started on eBay, but I had a lot of problems with like unpaid auction winners, and so I moved over to Etsy, which is kind of better anyway for people who are really looking for vintage.
And how has the response been? Like, how do people find you?
I think it's, when I post something on my shop, Etsy has the option to set a whole bunch of tags. And so you just have to get really good at keywords. Like, what if I have this really great gunny sacks blouse or something like that? What would the search terms be for somebody searching for something like that? And it's really just luck of the draw what people are searching for at the moment, and they find me.
So what are 3 tips that you could share about just finding great thrift clothing and great vintage clothing? So basically, listeners, I randomly found Carlin at the Wash Park it was at the Art Students Fair or something like that, festival. And the clothes were, first of all, they were very classic. I thought that it was amazing to me that some of the pieces were from 1980 and 1960s, and I mean, beautiful, beautiful pieces of clothing. So I'm wondering, what's your process? Like, how are you finding this stuff, and how would you school us in the art of thrifting?
Well, I mean, first of all, those are my trade secrets, but I'll be really nice and share them with you today. I mean, just in terms of like where you should go thrifting, personally, I prefer to go kind of to the outskirts of a major city, in the suburbs, or maybe even slightly rural, where you have more of an aging, lifelong population that will have the type of era of clothes that you might be looking for. And it's also way less picked over, and sometimes it's cheaper. And so, I generally don't thrift in the city of Denver. I thrift around Denver. I also, I have days and hours that would be better for finding a lot of stuff. So my tip would be, maybe Monday morning or Tuesday morning, right after a thrift store opens. That's when they are putting out all the donations they get over the weekend. So they'll have more stuff. And then maybe like right before a big sale, they try to throw all their inventory out. So there's just like way more to look at.
What are some of the things that you're looking for when you're looking for these pieces of clothes? How does something jump out at you where you're like, this is going to be something that someone else is going to really love?
I guess, most of it is I look for things I myself love. And so if other people love it too, that's like an added bonus. Also, I pay attention to trends, read fashion blogs and magazines and stuff. And so, you kind of notice like, everyone's really into the mom jeans right now. So I might look a little more for that style.
So basically what you're saying is fashion basically never goes away. Like, styles never go away. They just kind of come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of like materials, what are the materials that you tend to stay away from? Do you purchase things that are knits, or do you stay away from knits or rayon, or like, is there a certain thing that you're like, I never touch this because it's a pain in the butt and it's never going to be, no one's going to be happy with it?
Yeah, well, personally, I'm not super into anything polyester or synthetic, just because it just looks costumey to me. So I tend to stick to organic materials like nice cottons, linens, wool, things like that.
And what would be some of your tips for actually caring for the clothing that you're finding? They're older pieces, clearly they're vintage. So what are some of the things that you would tell listeners to do to make sure that they care for their clothing and they last as long as they possibly can?
I hate going to the dry cleaner. I'm sure a lot of people do. So I try to, unless it's like this incredible piece and I have to have it, I tend to buy things that you can clean yourself, and I'll air dry a lot. So the dryer can really ruin things. If something has like a weird smell or a stain that I'm just like not sure whether I can get it out, I don't buy it. So I stay away from stuff like that.
For a person who is nervous about thrift shopping, what would you say about that? You know what I mean? Like, the people get weird about, like, someone else wore this clothing. Well, how do you get them past that concern?
Lately, I have some friends who are kind of grossed out by it. What I do, the fact that I would like go in and like touch all these things. the thing I tell them to kind of get them to wrap their heads around it is you go into Nordstrom and you try on clothes. There's probably like 5 other people who tried it on before you. Anyways, it's not as clean as you think it is there either. So, maybe that helps people to kind of put it in perspective. And also, for me at least, I do a lot of closet clean outs, and I pull things out of my closet and give them to Goodwill, and they're clean. So most likely the clothes that are hanging on the rack at a thrift store are not as dirty as you might think. But you kind of have to have the stomach for it. So if you don't like disorganization or crowds, maybe not the place for you. But if you like to dig, and if you like to find something really special, then it's a great place to go.
How much do you think you've saved by embracing the thrift life on clothing costs?
Well, full disclosure, most of my outfits are thrifted and $3, $5 here. But then
so awesome.
Yeah, but then I tend to have very expensive taste in shoes, and so I buy myself a pair of shoes or whatever, so it kind of like balances it all out. So for me, it's just, sure, I do save money, but where I like looking for something really, really specific and I have to have it, like a pair of Frye Boots or something.
Oh my God, Frye is one of my favorite brands. Oh God.
Oh yeah, I have like, I think I have 14 pairs of Frye Boots shoes.
That they have a location in Cherry Creek, right?
Yeah, I do. And of course I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. And what would be the top 3 classic pieces that you would recommend any woman have in her wardrobe?
That's a really good question. And it probably changes depending on like what you do, like if you work in an office or something like that. But I would say like a well-cut, really nice material blazer is great, because you can find really incredible blazers from the 60s or 70s, like beautiful wool, gold buttons, just like beautifully cut, that you would spend hundreds at a high-end boutique for that kind of quality. So definitely a good blazer. In the winter, probably you can get a nice cashmere sweaters for like $5. Yeah, sometimes you can get lucky with bags. Clutches in particular, I would say, are pretty overlooked at thrift stores. So you can get a really nice leather clutch for like $3.
So we're in a place that's decidedly unfashionable, other parts of the country. So I'm going to be honest and say I'm amazed at the stuff that you found. I'm not saying that we're all hicks wearing like shit kickers, cowboy boots and stuff like that, which aren't bad. I like cowboy boots. But I mean, compared to a New York, I feel like Denver has its own special challenges. So if you're a frugal fashionista, like a frugal person who loves thrifting or is someone who's excited about thrifting, what would you say about finding stuff here?
Yeah, I totally get your point. The aesthetic in Denver is definitely more casual and maybe skews more Western style. So if you're into that, it's like amazing, the thrifting here. And I tend to be into some of that stuff. But I think particularly if you're looking for vintage, just decades ago, people just dressed up more, and so the things that you find at a thrift store, if they're actually vintage, tend to be a little more dressy. And so definitely look at like blazers are a great example, or more formal wear dresses, nice wool skirts, things like that. You can definitely find it here. It's just not modern.
Is there a city outside of Denver where you're like, I love to thrift in this place? This is like the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. It's Aurora, actually.
Really?
For whatever reason. I think it's just because, the people who live in Aurora from a certain era, they just kind of spent all of their lives there. And so they have this incredible collection of, 60s, whatever. And unfortunately, they die. Their families might donate to I mean, that's really...
Well, we all do it. So.
Yeah, we all do it. But I mean, that's really where probably most of the great vintage comes from, is like, a family cleaning out grandma's house. And so Aurora is really great for that. And it's probably also just not picked over in Aurora like it is like if you were in the middle of Denver. There's more hipsters thrifting in Denver than there are in Aurora.
I'm laughing. And then outside of the state of Colorado, where do you love to thrift? Like, what's a place that you're like, this is the best thing ever?
In Colorado or outside of Colorado?
Outside of Colorado.
Oh, I mean, I haven't really found a great place to thrift that I'm like, every time I go, I have to. But like every time I go on a trip, like I will thrift if I have time, make sure I have a little extra room in my luggage. Recently I was in Southern California and I hit some shops in, where were we? Reseda. And that was actually pretty good, but I don't usually have great luck when I'm in LA.
Do you ever purchase shoes? And if you do, what are some of the tips that you would say for people who get skeeved out by that? So I do. Yeah, I purchase used shoes. Mm-hmm. I have no problem with that, but I also run a personal finance blog. So clearly I'm like skewed to the, like one way. But what's your process and how can we clean them so the cooties don't get on our toes?
That's probably one of the grosser parts of a thrift store. So I totally understand that. I do thrifted secondhand shoes. I tend to look a little bit more for like boots from the 70s. And if you think about it, like people wear socks with boots. So they're generally not as gross, I guess.
That's actually a really good tip. I hadn't even thought about that.
And the outside, certainly, I have saddle soap and leather conditioner, and that helps to make it look a little newer. On the inside, I don't know what the stuff is. One of my friends swears by it, but get a bowling alley, the disinfectant that they spray into bowling shoes. I would imagine that's probably a good way to clean it up.
You don't like walk around with that stuff or have that on hand?
I do have hand sanitizer in my car at all times. So like right after I leave a thrift store, I'm just like using it like lotion. But and I had thought about for a while, I'm like, would I look like a total crazy person if I wore gloves when I went to a thrift store? But ultimately I decided against it because I need to like be able to feel the material. But
I have actually seen people like though. And we do think they're crazy. Oh, yeah. So I'm glad you held back.
Yeah, I decided against it.
So I think some of the takeaways, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Colorado life, is just everything's a trade-off. There's good stuff out there. If you're outside of the city of Denver and Aurora, like you're listening to this episode in another state, think about your town and the towns around you. Do your research so you have some ideas on classic styles so that you can go out and find something that will really elevate your style and make you feel amazing, but for a hell of a lot less. And then are there specific stores that have shopping savings deals, or are there certain stores where you can go in and they're like, this is 50% off on this day? Or what would you say about that? Or like a savings card? Or
so unfortunately my favorite shop pulled out of Colorado, and that's the Savers chain.
Oh, yeah, Savers was good.
Oh my God. I was so sad when that happened. But no, I mean, every thrift store, they'll have like usually every day there will be like one color tag that's 50% off. And the local thrift shops here, like the big chain in Colorado is Arc Thrift. Yeah. And every Saturday, the whole store, except for like maybe the one color tag, is 50% off. And usually also, major holidays, they'll have big sales and like everything's 50% off. So if you don't mind crowds, that's a great time to go Saturday.
I have a 2-part question. How often do you replenish your wardrobe? Like before you had a store, how often were you doing that? And what would you say your annual clothing budget would be minus the shoes? Because you mentioned Frye Boots, and we're not going to factor that in, but so minus the shoes, what do you think you're spending and saving as a result of that?
I don't keep as good records as I probably should, so I don't have a total idea of what I'm spending. And also the fact that I'm running a shop, it's like I'm buying things that fit me so that I can model them for the shop. And so I tend to kind of like borrow from my shop instead of buy things for myself.
That's my kind of store right there.
Yeah, no, that's the great thing is like if you're selling used clothes, you can use them because they're already used, so it's not going to ruin anything. Yeah, it just depends on how busy I am. Sometimes I'll have a pretty easy week at work, and so I can kind of like take off an hour here or there and then buy $30 worth of clothes at one store, and I'll go 2 or 3 times a week, and then sometimes I don't go for a month. And it's just all over the place, really.
So I also have a online community and work with digital entrepreneurs, and I would love it if you could speak on or speak about running an online store and some of the challenges and some of the different lessons that you've learned kind of going through that process?
Started out on eBay, and I had a hard time with a lot of people winning an auction but then not paying, and a lot of crazies actually. And so that's why I moved over to Etsy, and Etsy tends to have more like-minded people who are maybe a little more reasonable. But I do have difficult customers from time to time who either they decide to change their mind once they get something and want to return it, even though I don't have a return policy unless I made a mistake, or they'll just get very angry that something is vintage. They wanted something brand new, or they just don't understand it. It's very weird. So I do get a lot of weird messages and requests and complaints, but I've just learned not to take those things personally, and not to worry about it too much. I try to make things right. I try to make people happy, but ultimately you can't make everybody happy. That's kind of how I've learned to deal with it.
And how have you, are you actively working to scale it up? Or are you happy to just have it? What's the goal, I guess, is the better question. You know how sometimes it's a passion project and you're just happy? Is there another goal in addition to just having the store?
Well, I think I always have a number in mind that if I consistently hit it in sales, I would think about not being a lawyer anymore, or being a part-time lawyer or something like that. But I realistically, I don't think it's possible. It's more of a hobby. It pays some of the bills, and it's fun to source something for $2 and then sell it for $50. So it's more about having fun and seeing how happy people are to find this really awesome thing and that enriches their wardrobe they love to wear all the time.
When you do your closet clean out, is there a process that you go through, or what is your number one tip for that? Because I think a lot of people love to bring in fashion, but they have a hard time letting it go. Yeah.
Well, I'm maybe not the best person to ask that, because for my own wardrobe, I'm brutal. I will get rid of things
really?
No pride, no sentimentality attached to it. But on the other hand, I have a basement full of inventory for my shop, so I don't know. But just be realistic about what your life is like and what your wardrobe should look like. I used to have to wear a suit almost every day, and now I mostly work from home for Silicon Valley companies, and
nice.
So I don't need the suit. Let's maybe keep one of those things that if I ever have to meet a client or something, I could put it on, but otherwise it doesn't get worn, so get rid of it.
And I guess my last couple of questions will be about Colorado. This is a Colorado-based podcast. How did you, are you originally from here, or how did you find your way to Colorado, and how has it been so far?
Like many people in Denver, I am not from Colorado. I actually am from the Bay Area. I went to school elsewhere on the East Coast, and I came back to the Bay Area. But my husband and I felt like we were just scraping by there. It's so expensive, and his family is all now here in Colorado as well. So we're just let's move closer to family and afford things. So that's how we ended up here.
That's kind of funny, actually. And has it been a good move? And what would you say? I'm trying to get people to talk about the stuff that makes them crazy in addition to the stuff that they like. So start with the stuff that you're just ugh, and then end with the stuff that you really like.
Yeah.
That may have caught you by surprise.
So I think my biggest complaint about Denver, and this is true for any city if you're not used to it, but the drivers are just crazy.
They're horrible.
People in Denver are so nice. You can talk to a complete stranger on the street and have this incredible conversation. But for whatever reason, if they're in a car and do not care about pedestrians, they will mow you down. They just run stop signs. They run red lights. It's insane. So I don't like that. And it's not super diverse here, coming from the Bay Area. It's obviously a melting pot there. And so, Denver is very homogenous. So that kind of sucks. But other than that, it's been such an easy transition. I grew up in the Bay Area. That will always be home. And I thought I would have a harder time moving to Denver, but it's been so easy. And the food scene isn't really great. except for maybe like hole in the wall Asian. That's definitely lacking here as compared to the Bay Area. But the food scene's great. Everyone's like so nice, like to the point where when I first moved here, people would smile at me and be like, "What do they want from me?" Because I'm used to people being rude and scowling, and so I really love that about Denver. I'm guessing it rings true for most of Colorado.
It's so funny that you mentioned the driving because I'm actually an adult who learned to drive as an adult. So I'm an adult new driver. And part of what happened was I grew up in Boulder where I didn't need to drive. And then I was dealing, I have a personal finance blog. I had all this debt and I was like, I'm not going to buy a car and like make it worse. Adult who learned to drive as an adult. And part of it was money. Like I had, a personal finance blog for a reason. Like my finances were all over the place and I was not going to buy a new car. Or a car to make it worse. And then I was getting around by bike and how Boulder people do. But part of my hesitation was people are crazy behind the wheel. And so I saw how people were driving and it really created a sense of anxiety. Now I still have this sense of anxiety, but I worked past it and I learned how to drive and I have a car. But I actually just had not an incident, but a thing where someone did this maneuver that just made no sense. And so I'm glad that you've confirmed that I'm not completely a wuss and completely like high strung about this, but that there's a legitimate issue that people are legitimately the sweetest people until they get behind the wheel and you're like, what is going on with you? They get crazy. So thank you, because other people hear me talk about this and they're like, oh, Michelle. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. They're crazy. It's like they have like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And then the other thing that you've said, it's so funny. Last week, I actually shared an episode with Julie from Denver Noms. And so she's a food blogger. And for you to say that there's a good food scene, being a person from San Francisco from the Bay Area is huge to me, because I remember when we just had steak. And so like I remember those days. Like I was young enough that I couldn't really appreciate them because I didn't really have money. But for you to say that there's a food scene, that's pretty freaking awesome. So I'm wondering, what are a couple of your favorite restaurants that you would recommend to someone who's not familiar with Denver or new to Denver?
I think what Denver does really, really well with food is like new American, fancy junk food. Really great at that. But I think my favorite places have been places like Acorn that do that kind of new American thing. Cho 77. Oh. I know I said that there's no good Asian food in Denver. This is the one exception.
Do you ever go to Federal?
No, I thrift around there. I have been told there's very good taquerias, so I definitely have to check that out.
No, but Federal has really good Vietnamese food, and my Vietnamese American friends with Vietnamese parents actually will eat there. So
that's a good sign.
So just so you know, and so there is good Asian food, but it's just not going to be in Denver proper. It'll be on Federal. Yeah. So just as a side note.
Or Aurora.
Actually.
Yeah.
Korean barbecue.
Apparently there's a nice Filipino restaurant in Aurora we'll have to go check out.
Oh, okay. I'm going to add that to my list. We're wrapping up, and do you have any other tips for the would-be future thrifter that we may not have covered?
I personally found my own style. It's not necessarily limited to thrifting, but I found my own style by trial and error. And so the thrift store is really great to try things, and maybe they don't work on you, or maybe they do. But I think the fact that you might not quite get it right the first time for yourself, I'd probably like to share that if you're into vintage, it might look at costumey on you for a while until you figure out how to mix it with modern clothes or something like that. So just do your thing and you'll find your style.
For people who they heard at the beginning of the episode, but I want to make sure that they get your social media. Like, are you on Instagram? If you could share that and then share your link again, that would be awesome.
So I am on Instagram, and my name is Thrifting Coups, THRIFTINGCOUPS, and I'm on Etsy, thriftingcoups.etsy.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carlin. And I hope that business comes your way. And we're just so excited to have you here. Are you looking for amazing and unique fashion, art, or jewelry? Look no further. Start buying your birthday, holiday, or just because gifts from Etsy. I'm a proud affiliate. Click the link in the show notes to check Etsy out today.